Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jason Torres. We have a really interesting topic here today, discussing the way forward for petroleum engineers, a unique look at the academia angle of all of this. One of the biggest questions that I've received at a lot of SPE events is, should I pursue or continue a degree in petroleum engineering? Is that a major that is going to do me well 10 years down the road? And both of our guests, both of whom are department heads from highly reputable petroleum engineering departments in the United States, are going to be moving into this discussion. So our guests today are going to be Jeff Spath from Texas A&M University and Jennifer Miskimins from the Colorado School of Mines. And I think SPE is uniquely positioned to bridge this conversation between the oil and gas workforce and academia, because really when these two arms of the industry work in harmony, I think that the future can be quite bright. So let's go ahead and bring both of our guests into this conversation. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Glad to have both of you here. I know that this conversation could have been completely different 6 months ago. So to add a little bit of context in this conversation, COVID-19 really changed the way that the university system worked. And going back into March, April, and May, almost overnight, things did have to make some adjustments. Spring semester or quarter, however your system uses it, of 2020, it's going to be referenced for years, the way that adjustments were made. So what were some key adjustments that both of you had to make? Jeff, we can start with you.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Jason. So beginning with spring break, which was mid-March, our students returned to campus only to find that everything except dining facilities and libraries and dormitories were closed. So they had no access to their research labs, they had no access to the teaching labs, and of course they had no access to face-to-face instruction. So to the credit of both the faculty and the students, I think within a week or two at most, everybody seemed at least somewhat comfortable with either remotely or via courses that were specifically designed to be online. Significant difference, obviously, is that they were physically not able to come to campus. They had to do their learning, they had to do their homework, they had to have their exams proctored by distance. And so, you know, for better or worse, I think we managed to continue the teaching and the examinations to a reasonably high standard. But obviously, one of the things, you know, I've had a lot of conversations with students. One of the things that they didn't get was the social aspect, the ability to interact physically, face to face with their instructor, and the ability to continue their research. So there was actually some good things that came out of this, and I think we'll be using these going forward, probably, you know, forever, because we've learned a lot about how we can instruct students remotely and virtually, but obviously they missed out on a lot too. And so going forward, we're going to try to combine the good things we learned from this experience with a hybrid model in which some of the courses and all of the research is performed in person.
I think from our side, Colorado School of Mines, we were very similar to A&M. We, within a span of about 2 weeks, our students really didn't even come back from spring break. They were told that not to come back to campus if at all possible, and that everything would be going online. Had to shut down the research labs, have since started to open those back up. I think probably one of the more difficult things was for the seniors, graduate students that were scheduled to graduate, because they didn't get to finish out that semester with their peers. So they had to have some virtual graduations and deal with that side of thing. But I think from the teaching standpoint, very similar to what Jeff said, kudos to everybody involved. The faculty and the students came very quickly up to speed on just how to offer those classes and to get as much of the experience out of it as possible, but definitely achieve the learning outcomes that we were shooting for in that case.
Thank you again for taking time for this. What will it be like to apply internationally for entry-level positions in the near future? Is that something that you could both shed a little bit more light on. Jennifer, we can go ahead and start with you on that one.
Sure. I think applying from the international standpoint, I think brings some short-term challenges with it. I think with the level of travel restrictions that we're seeing worldwide, becomes a little bit of an issue with physically moving or applying to positions like that. I think it's probably very dependent on the company as far as how they're willing to work with remote. But that's from an academic standpoint, that's a concern that we have about just bringing people into the classroom in the fall is international situations like that. So I think it's probably going to be delayed a little bit if it's an in-person type of situation. I'm not really sure if those opportunities will necessarily not be there, but just rather be delayed.
Are you considering becoming an SPE member? When you join SPE, you join a society of dedicated professionals just like you, working to address the technical challenges of the global oil and gas industry. SPE membership gives you the opportunity to make local and global connections and build a network of influential technical leaders from every discipline. Learn more at spe.org/join.
Getting back to a little bit how the university model has changed a little bit in light of all these situations, what lessons were learned in March, April, and May that will be included in your upcoming plans? Jeff?
Yeah, obviously we learned as we went along, and I mentioned before the proctoring of exams, which is, you don't think much about until you have 40 or so students, each with their own camera and laptop in their living room trying to take an exam. And so there's various methods, commercial firms that do this, which we've utilized. We utilize teaching assistants, of course, various technologies to ensure, let's say, ethical taking of the exams. Big issue that we didn't foresee until it was actually in front of us. Difficulties that we had, notwithstanding any IT, was the ability to communicate back and forth, with the students. This is why you have face-to-face teaching in the first place. I feel like, again, having spoken with a lot of students, one of the first things they missed was that personal interaction with the professor. And I'm talking about just straight lectures here. It gets worse, of course, when you talk about capstone courses, for example, where you're expected to work in a team. It's very difficult, and I'm not sure we've reached complete consensus on how best to teach capstone courses remotely. And then you have the labs, which, it's painful to have to sit at home and watch a teaching assistant or a lecturer perform the lab on video and then send you the data. It's just not the same. So there's no doubt that there's still a lot to be done. And I think this is the main reason, or one of the two main reasons, why going forward this fall, and I think Colorado School of Mines is in the same boat, we're doing hybrid courses. So those courses that require a lot of interaction, such as capstone design courses and lab work, we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's on campus and face-to-face.
And Jennifer, I do want to give you an opportunity to respond to that also coming up. But I think this kind of goes along lines of what Jeff was just talking about with getting everyone acclimated to the new virtual environment or the hybrid environment. Any advice that you can give for students who are not able to meet face-to-face right now? Students who would have gone to SPE events or maybe had some other opportunity to meet face-to-face with a mentor. What can they be doing? Is it LinkedIn? Is there another option? Jennifer, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I've had that discussion with quite a few of my students too. Individually, it's a concern they have because of job market and just that networking capability. What I'm telling them, and maybe a little bit of a plug for SPE, but SPE is holding a lot of virtual networking events. Whether it's SPE or other venues, there's a lot of lunch and learn type opportunities out there. And so trying to encourage them not to get frustrated just because they're locked away, at home or whatever, and can't get out. to do it virtually. That there's a lot of opportunities to get out there and have networking opportunities with, whether you're listening to a podcast somewhere that's live, or whether there's even roundtables like this to just get out there and get a chance to meet people. And it's really no different than the physical networking. Sometimes that's tough for people, and it's something that people have to work at. This just brings a different option to it, that it has to be done virtually. So get out there and get to meeting people. Don't just get locked away.
And if I could add to that,
yes, please.
Jason, I'm glad you mentioned SPE, Jennifer, because it's my understanding that in some of these conferences and workshops, et cetera, that are going virtual, there's a parallel area, if you like, virtual area for networking. And so even though you can't go to ERTEC in Austin or one of the upcoming workshops, you can still tune in to the event and do your networking. And I suppose the nice thing is it's a level playing field, right? If nobody's able to go to these conferences and events, then do your best networking virtually, because everyone else is.
And networking over the years as a function has adapted anyway. So this is just a new form of adaptation for networking, getting people up to par on that. Another interesting question. This kind of goes back to Jennifer giving you an opportunity to answer how everything will be changing in the fall. If things do get worse in the fall regarding the coronavirus, teaching wise, any type of education wise, what would you do differently then that hasn't happened as of yet now?
Yeah. So I think it's a really steep learning curve. It happened really quickly for us. And I think there's a lot of things that we're starting to learn about it. Jeff mentioned it. One is just how to make sure that exams are administered correctly, that people have that same playing field, that level playing field, as far as being able to submit homework and take their exams. I think the other thing that we've probably learned about is, even in this day and age, how access sometimes for people to online services, whether it's, I've got a couple of people right now that are in internships that they can't get good internet because they're somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. So getting people accessibility to those online opportunities. The other thing that, and I think this is very specific to petroleum engineering, is that we have so many students that if they are not on campus, and we are going live also, we're absolutely planning on going live, but we know that not everybody will be able to return to campus. We have to be really cognizant of time zone considerations. We have to hold office hours such that that everybody has access to those. So I think it really is kind of a lot of just making sure that everybody's needs are addressed when we go into these online situations.
And I think the big question that everyone has, and Jeff, I'm going to direct this one to start with you, and then Jennifer, you can follow up. But that popular question is, and we can even reference the downturns. Should I even be studying petroleum engineering? You look at people who maybe are trying to start a family, and how difficult that can be if there's a downturn now every decade or so. In Texas alone, we can look at the fact that there have been 26,000 jobs lost in the month of April, the largest that I could find on record for a single month. So how do you respond when a student or a prospective student asks you that question? Should I be pursuing a degree in petroleum engineering?
Yes.
And why?
Obviously,
it's my fault for asking a yes/no question, right?
We're all asked that question. The first thing I'd say is that cycles aren't unique to the oil and gas business by any means. They might be more frequent given they're tied to a commodity, but they're certainly not. It's not unique to our industry. Of course, we see it more than we see any other industry. The second thing I'd say, somewhat joking when I said yes, there's no doubt that we are in the very early stages of a very long energy transition. You look at any credible predictions, whether it's from ExxonMobil or BP or the IEA, and hydrocarbons will continue to supply by far the majority of our global energy demands well into the 2050s. So that's a long career right there. And don't forget about petrochemicals and fertilizers and other uses that petroleum has. It isn't just electricity generation, and it isn't just the fuels to fuel your automobile. So I don't think I'm being too biased when I say that the oil and gas business will be around for decades to come. The world is going to continue to require petroleum and its derivatives. So it's going to continue to require petroleum engineers. And at Texas A&M, we're actually doubling down on this. We're sticking to our guns, if you like, and not trying to move into other forms of renewables, for example, like some programs are. We feel like there will be I hate to give a number, but generation still of petroleum engineers required in our industry.
I like Jeff's answer to that. Yes. I'd second the energy transition comments. It's a transition, it's not a switch. And a lot of people, when you talk to them that are outside the industry and don't look at it from a big picture standpoint, they think that there's this magical switch that we're all of a sudden going to go from fossil fuel based energy to others. It's not. It's going to take time. It takes plenty of time. There's plenty of time, like Jeff was saying, for careers to be made in that realm. And even if you want to look at it from a more short term, long term, it's relative to people. But from a short term standpoint, as we conquer this COVID as a human race, the economy is going to start to turn around. And as the economy turns around, energy drives economies. And so as we start to see that pick up in the short term and get the economy turned around, we're going to see a need for energy and a demand for PEs. And that's going to continue on to the future as we go along with it. So,
noting towards the future, then, most universities saw petroleum engineering enrollments cut in half in the United States as a result of the 2014 to 2016 downturn. What needs to happen to either bring those numbers up, or are the numbers not really as big of a concern as they sound? And if so, why?
I'm not concerned. I think, if you look at any history of petroleum engineering enrollment, it's cyclical. Yeah. We're in a cycle now, which is deeper than most because of its, the combination of the two events we're all familiar with. And so it might take a little longer to bounce back, but you see demand coming back already. I saw this morning that airlines are up 25% occupancy from their low, and they're not flying on battery power or windmills or anything. So I would tell students that prospective students that look and say, oh, the numbers are down, why would I get into this? This is a temporary downturn. And there's, I won't speak for Jennifer, but I've been around long enough to see, 5 or 6 of these, whether it's due to oil embargoes or geopolitical events or the Gulf War I or the Gulf War II or, market share driven downturns, you name it. This is just another downturn and it will come back. And so I'm not particularly worried about undergraduate enrollment. What I'm worried about is graduate enrollment for purposes completely beyond anyone's control, such as the ability to get here and the ability to get visas.
The very nature, it's cyclic. What goes down, and like Jeff said, we're in a deep one, but what goes down is going to go back up. And it's the nature of the game. Anybody that goes into this industry has to be at least aware of that. We have major cycles, we have minor cycles in and around it, but it's a great industry to be in. Jeff and I wouldn't have been in it as long as we've been in it, and a lot of other people if we didn't love it and have a passion for it. And I think anybody that's going into it just needs to realize that and be aware of it. But if you hang on and you have that passion, it's a great place to have a career.
And getting that career, one of the first steps for many is the internship. How to get an internship, what steps to make. Is that something that the student should be doing something different in this new world that we're living in? Or is there adjustments that companies can be making to better reach out to these petroleum engineering soon-to-be graduates?
Yeah. I think it's both. I'm not sure about A&M, but we're getting ready to do a virtual career fair. And I think a lot of people are probably looking to do that. When I say we, Mines is in the fall. There's going to be some things that are going to be different about that. I think there's also going to be some interesting things that are going to be opportunistic for students. Instead of having to wait in a really, really long line, they've got an equal opportunity to see different companies and to seek out these different companies that are coming from for a career path or for the career fair. But I think from the company side of it, they're also realizing that, okay, we're going to have to do things differently. They might have limitations on being able to travel or being able to get around campuses. So I think there's going to be some definite logistical changes. I don't think the bottom line, applying, networking, getting involved, developing a good resume, I don't think any of that's going to change. It's just how we approach it and how we go through it.
Yeah, internships are very, very important. In fact, we require our seniors to have taken at least one internship before we let them register for senior courses. We like to think we have a good reputation for putting graduates out there that contribute on day one. And how do you do that? You spend time sitting on a rig or sitting in an office or what have you. And so in this downturn, again, similar to previous downturns, the companies can help by, for example, splitting the summer into two and hiring, half a dozen interns for the first half and half a dozen for the second half, and that will satisfy the requirement. What we're doing in the department to facilitate this, given that it's a requirement, is we're replacing, traditional internships where you might go sit a rig, and we're combining research with workshops. So we've reached out to various software vendors and operators and service companies to deliver anywhere from a couple days to 2-week workshops. And the students have the option of picking this workshop, that workshop, combining it with a 2-week research project with this professor or that professor, and that satisfies the requirement for an internship. But for the students, the only advice I can give students is, and I tell them this all the time, I don't know if they listen, but don't wait until your junior year because you have to start early. Companies are only hiring full-time positions these days from their intern pools. So you really have to think early, even as a freshman, and get that most basic job. And this is the other thing I tell students is, I don't care what your first job is, whether it's full-time or over the summer. If it's painting the dog houses on the rig site or driving around in a truck strapping tanks. I know that's an outdated example, but do whatever it is you can to get some kind of experience to get your foot in the door for the next one.
Yeah, the foot in the door is very important. And another resource that is available to the students who have recently graduated, who are out there looking for their first job, SPE does have an industry job board. It's a tool for members and it's for employers too. It's dedicated to positions within the oil and gas and related industries. So we can include a link to that in the description of this post as a resource that any SPE member could also use.
Much of the work of the Society of Petroleum Engineers is accomplished by members. Become a volunteer and use your knowledge and experience to influence SPE programs and activities. As a volunteer, you can enhance your leadership skills while meeting and working with other SPE members from across the globe. There are many opportunities to get involved, regardless of your experience, location, or experience level. To learn more about the League of Volunteers, visit spe.org/volunteer.
So what skills can students and recent grads really focus on right now to ensure that they have longevity in their career? Whether it's thinking about the skills that will actually just get you in that first step, like Jeff was mentioning, get you in the door, to get you recognized by the company, and then what will also just ensure that longevity once you're there as well.
Well, first thing I'd say is, don't focus on skill sets that are going to give you that long career. Focus on what you need when you graduate. And most programs around the world, we have been tweaking our to include things that industry is asking for. the subjects around ESG, the subjects around data analytics and the application of machine learning to problem solving. We've done that, and we're continue to add courses as we, I've got a very strong industry board that I meet with several times a year, and they tell me what recruiters want in a graduate. And so the curriculum is constantly changing. I wouldn't worry so much about what skills you need outside of petroleum engineering, but you can think about, I give advice to a lot of students who are maybe hesitant to commit to a master's degree in petroleum. And so I think I saw that as a question go by. Take petroleum engineering as a minor. Petroleum engineering graduate, take a related minor, take finance, take chemical engineering, take data science as a minor, broaden your skills base. But I would worry about those first skills to get the first job again, rather than what you're going to need. Who knows what you're going to need? When I got out of school, it certainly wasn't data science. I think it was EOR was the big 80s. And so don't try to predict what is going to be a required skill in 10, 15 years. Focus on doing as much as you can within petroleum engineering, and then make sure your electives are in something that interests you, obviously, but something that will add marketability to yourself, like a data science, like a finance, like chemistry, et cetera.
Jennifer, can you add to that? And then also maybe discuss how can what you learn as a petroleum engineer in university potentially be applied to other fields?
Mm-hmm. So, the following up with the first discussion, diversification, I think is important. I mean, we want to have people that are very, very well trained in petroleum engineering and have that base of petroleum engineering. But kind of like Jeff said, taking electives or taking minors in areas that you have an interest in can supplement that base education, but also provide you with that opportunity for diversification. So, the data analytics is a big one. We have a minor at Mines in data analytics. We also this fall are launching an online certificate in data analytics. We are looking at things like we have a minor in midstream. We've all, for a long time, those are worked through our department, but we also have opportunities to get minor in engineering economics. We have what's known as a 4+1 option, where if somebody is interested in a master's, they can double count some of their credits from their bachelor's to a master's degree, and work through that master's a little bit quicker. So I think it is, it's that diversification. It's looking for you still want to have interest in it. Nobody wants to take classes that they don't have to and don't like. But that'll help with future endeavors, both short-term and long-term. I think from the the outside petroleum side of things, I think there's some opportunities, maybe some more that petroleum engineers, we study fluid flow and porous media, so things like geothermal energy options meet naturally with that, and we're seeing some increased interest in that. But we're a petroleum engineering department. We're going to stay a petroleum engineering department for quite some time to come. We just want to provide students some of those outside opportunities also, and things that they can look at to help strengthen those skills.
Just let me jump in here, because you mentioned diversification, and I couldn't agree more. When you think about the skills, when you think about the core competencies of an engineering graduate, it's understanding the subsurface.
Yeah.
Why not think about industries like geothermal, as Jennifer mentioned? Why not think about methane hydrates and mining? And we just finished a minor in our Qatar campus on midstream, okay? Because petroleum engineers understand fluids and they understand thermodynamics, or they should. And so these are things that on the edges of traditional petroleum engineering will just make you that much more marketable. I mean, when you think about the main recruiters, they're already broadening their portfolios out of oil and gas. So we have to do the same, educate, and as we graduate students, so that they'll get jobs.
What about that next level of learning? Whether it's pursuing a master's, a PhD, is that something people can be doing with their time right now? More people are saying that they have a little bit more time on their hands working from home, a little bit more access to the internet and using the tools that are available there. What advice would you give someone who says they do have a little bit of extra time right now? How are a few ways that they could be investing it?
Well,
Go ahead, Jennifer.
yeah.
We're probably going to say the same thing again.
I think we're going to, well, I think it circles back to some of the earlier discussion, right? We have a lot more now online opportunities that people, if they do have some time on their hands, whether they're formally pursuing a degree or not, there's a lot of places to learn. And as you learn and you get that information, that's a great thing to put on a resume, and you put it on a resume and that leads to, future opportunities and improved opportunities. So I don't think you can ever go wrong learning more. It's just, what do you have that interest in and where do you want to go with that? So go ahead.
I would say that you don't, again, the short answer is, should you get an advanced degree in your spare time? Hell yeah. I worked for 4 or 5 years and then went back and got my master's, worked and came back to the same company, worked another 4 or 5 years, went and got my PhD, came back to the same company. But it doesn't necessarily have to be formal in the sense of getting a MS or a PhD. And I'd tell people this in management all the time, just make sure you're continuously improving yourself and continuously educating yourself, whether it's an SPE short course or a distance learning master's degree. We have a huge number of people right now. We talked about how enrollment was going down physically. Our distance learning enrollment's going through the roof exactly for this reason. They're working from home, they have time on their hands, and they're getting their master's of engineering in most cases in petroleum engineering. So the summary there is yes, whether or not you have spare time because of this virus, I have always encouraged employees and students both to constant, continuous education, or you'll fall behind.
And on the SPE front too, there's online resources, the online trainings, the webinars, whether you're looking for CEUs or just to continue your education in some degree, that's all available. We'll include those links in the description of the post too. Also, I would even encourage any student to look out and see, is there a chapter that I could join at my university that's an SPE chapter? And is there a section in the region that I can filter up in and network there and learn more from people who may have gone through what I'm going through right now, whether it be in my discipline or in my region alone, if you're going to stay in the same region. And that's something else that people have been asking too, with now that we've seen whether it's going to be considered by some the same downturn or a downturn every 3 years or so. If this trend continues, is that something that is being forecast at all? Is this something that we should be concerned about 3 years from now to see this come back again? Or how can we prepare to make that not happen from an academic standpoint?
I'm going to turn this easy question over to Jennifer because it's so easy.
I'll reach into my closet back here behind me and get my crystal ball out, and then we can work that out.
If someone takes this and uses it 3 years from now and says, "Well, you said this was going to happen," I mean, that's not what we're looking for. This is just
no. But I think seriously, first of all, I never give predictions on oil price. In fact, I never listen to anybody give predictions on oil price, and therefore cycles. But what we can do as educators is make sure that we give the students, the graduates, the skills, and we've talked about this already, but to make them as flexible as possible, as broad as possible, but rather than teaching them, very specifics subject-wise, you have to teach them fundamentals and then teach them how to solve problems so that they can graduate. Look, when companies hire petroleum engineers, they want petroleum engineers. And in good times, if they can't get them, what do? They get mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and civil engineers and aerospace engineers, and they turn them into petroleum engineers in their in-house training programs. Okay, so there's nothing saying the converse of that can't work. If you're a petroleum engineering graduate and in 3 years there's another significant downturn and you find yourself without employment, then go to work as an engineer. Be as broad as you can. And as educators, we have to make sure that they graduate with these problem solving skills so that they're flexible enough to weather the next downturn.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'd have to, it's interesting when you look at the downturns and we look at hiring numbers and percent placement and whatnot, and I think at Mines and I think at a lot of universities, the interesting thing is even when we see a decrease in percent placement in petroleum engineering, a lot of times that's actually the value is still, that percent placement is still higher than a lot of the other engineering disciplines that are being placed out there. So even when we see some downturns, I think it's because we do have some really broad skills that PEs might not go into the industry right at that point in time, but they have skills like Jeff's saying that they can get hired in a lot of other places. And so, yeah, we don't like to see those percentages go down at all, but I think we have to put it in context when we look at other situations and other opportunities that people are looking at, that we're still in really good shape, even in some of the rough years. Now, the caveats out there that, of course, this is a unique situation, but we see that in most of the downturns. So, it might be slightly different in this case, but the base truth should hold.
I'm glad you brought that up. And if I have a second for a little story. So I started in academia just over 2 years ago. And one of my first questions was, what is our placement ratio? How many of our petroleum engineering graduates get jobs upon graduation within, say, 6 months? And it was 80-something%. I think it was mid 80s, doesn't matter. And I thought, well, we have to do much better than that. I want it to be, in the mid 90s. And so I went to my peers, the department heads of mechanical, electrical, chemical, civil, nuclear, et cetera, and we were doing better than they were. So for the students out there who think that, you're going to go through a petroleum engineering program and you're going to graduate, and you're not going to find a job. I know CSM is similar. We're in the mid 80s, and that is at or above degrees you would think were much more marketable.
I really want to thank both of you for being so transparent. I know that a lot of these questions are questions that students and prospective students have really just wanted clear, understanding, thought-provoking answers to. And a lot of the point of this conversation was to spark that conversation. I do want to get final thoughts from both of you in a moment, but Jennifer, I'm going to put you slightly on the spot. You've been working on a book for SPE a little bit, so I do want to give you an opportunity to plug that really quick. So here's your opportunity for that.
Jason, we've worked on that together. He's been helping me with some of the PR. So there we go. Hydraulic fracturing fundamentals and advancements. SPE had not had a hydraulic fracturing book that covered the breadth of the topic since I believe it was 1989 monograph on advancements in hydraulic fracturing. And so SPE asked me if I would take on a project that had been started. And I think we eventually herded 28 authors into writing 18 different chapters. And yeah, we were able to finally release that last year. I won't tell you how many years it took to actually get that updated, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate that plug. So.
All right, so Jeff, let's go ahead and start with you then. Just final thoughts on this discussion. Last thing that you want to leave everyone with.
I don't have a book to plug. So my congratulations on that, Jennifer, by the way.
Thank you.
Herding a bunch of hydraulic fracturing experts has got to be unenviable, to say the least. My summary, I think, of all of this is, to me, when I agreed to do this webcast, I thought, well, the overarching premise is going to be whether or not students think they should go into petroleum engineering. Will there be a degree? Will there be a career there? And my answer, and naturally I might be a little biased, but look, if you pick the career you want to pick, don't pin your ambitions and aspirations on a few data points or some sloppy public opinion polls or biased articles that you might read in the literature. If you want a career that allows you to contribute to human flourishing, to be proud of what you do, lifting people out of poverty. If you want a career that gives you an international exposure, worldwide travel, adventure, all the rest, and let's not forget that it pays nicely when compared to other engineering graduates, then pick petroleum engineering. And if you're nervous, then hedge your bet and take a minor in something that's either related or unrelated. But that's my summary. And I'll go back, to my original answer, which is, should you pursue a career in petroleum engineering? Yes.
Jennifer?
Yeah, so I will add my last thoughts with a little bit of a personal story. 30 years ago, when I was kicking off my career, 30 plus maybe, I was having this exact same conversation, but I was on the opposite side. Everybody was telling me nobody in their right mind would go into petroleum engineering because I wasn't going to have a career and I was never going to have a career. And that 5 years later, I'd be unemployed and I'd have to go back to school and get a different degree. And I'm glad I didn't listen to them and those naysayers at that point in time. And I would say that we are back just having that same conversation because we're at the bottom possibly of a downturn. And again, that downturn is going to come up. Sometimes the best time in the world to go into an industry, especially a cyclic industry, is when you're in a downturn. Because as you're going into it, you're going to be the person that's going to be there when it pops out. And yeah, I will second what Dr. Spath said. Yes, people should consider petroleum engineering as a career, and I have no hesitation whatsoever telling anybody that.
And one thing, sorry, I know I had my chance, but one thing I can't believe we went 40 minutes without mentioning, and that is technology. I mean, if you excel at science and math, I don't know of another industry that has as exciting technologies as our industry. And I'm not going to go into them, but if you like STEM, you'll love petroleum engineering.
A great topic for another discussion
There you
too.
go.
I'm sure we could spend 40 minutes on that. Thank you both so much for your time again. Jeff Spath, Texas A&M University, Jennifer Miskimins with the Colorado School of Mines, department heads. I'm not allowed to use the word esteemed, I've learned, but definitely reputable people.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks to SPE for lining this up. And don't forget, those of you looking for a job, don't forget the SPE Job Board. It's working.
And we'll have that link in there for everyone to access. And that'll do it for this time. We'll see you next.